Hello everyone! Today I'm going to be finally answering the questions that some of you left on my Q&A prompt video. I'm so sorry it's taken me this long to answer them, but between getting sick and other videos being planned, it's just taken until now for me to finally get around to recording. But better late than never, I guess, right? So I guess to start off, I'll just mention what I'm working on right now. I made this doodle and I wasn't originally going to film it, but I realized that it might be really cool to have this playing while I answer some of your questions. So let me know if I continue to do Q&A videos if you like this format, that I have some kind of painting being done in the background. I mean, it's a lot slower than my normal speed painting videos are, just because this is a longer video, because I'm answering all these questions, it's taking longer. So let me know if you like this format, and also if you want to see more Q&A videos. I mean, leaving questions in the comments of previous Q&A videos might be a good way to set this up if it's something you're all interested in seeing, but just let me know in the comments if it's a video type that you'd like to see more of. Without further ado, I guess we'll just jump into the questions. So the first one is, what is your favorite watercolor painting that you've made? I can't pick just one, it's too hard. I mean, I like different paintings for different reasons. I mean, they could have sentimental value, or I like the way something turned out, or it was completely different from what I normally did, so I just like it because it's different. But I have a couple. I guess more recently one of my favorites would be Nocturne, because it's one of the few paintings that I've done where I feel like everything went as it should have, and I can't really think of anything that I could have improved on with that painting. I didn't make any mistakes, I really like the color palette. It was just one of the paintings that I've done that I feel turned out the best. It turned out exactly how I envisioned it. So I guess for right now, Nocturne is one of my favorites. But I'll splash a whole bunch of my favorites right here, so you can see some of the other ones. Next one, how did you find your style and how do I find my style? Oh, the obligatory style question. It's funny because I don't feel like I really have a style, and I might get some hate for this, but I feel like styles are sometimes just getting stuck in a rut. Like, there are certain people that they obviously manipulate reality into a certain way, and that's a style. But for me, because I have more of a realistic thing, or I just do so many different types of art, I don't really feel like I have a style. But then I have a whole bunch of people saying that, oh, I really like your style. So I think a style sometimes is just drawing or painting a similar image using the same techniques or the same colors, and it's perceived that you have a style. So I guess finding your style is just painting a lot and realizing what you like. Because if you drew like a woman with long hair using purples and blues, or like just surrealistic colors, and did that like 3 times, people would see continuity between the pieces and you'd be perceived to have a style. So I guess that was an easy, semi-strange way to answer that question, but it's just something that I don't feel like I have, so maybe it's just completely perception-wise the continuity that people see between your work. So obviously I really like to do watercolors a lot, so all of my portraits might vaguely look the same because I like certain colors more, or I use a similar technique all the time. But then you look at the details of the different pieces and you realize, oh, well, this person has like Art Nouveau style hair and this person has more realistic hair, and it just doesn't always match up, but it kind of somewhat looks like it all belongs together. Yeah, so I guess finding your style, if you want to do like more of a cartoony style, that kind of thing, I'd say just draw or paint a lot and figure out what kind of pieces you want to manipulate. Because most people's style, for manga, for example, the characters have larger eyes than what a realistic person has. It's not it's not realism. They manipulate the dimensions of different things. So I guess just draw and mess around and see what combinations of different things that you like, and eventually you'll just learn what you like in your artwork, and you can just continue drawing like that, and you will have a style. So I guess find a style by painting more, which is probably the most useless answer, but that's all I have. Okay, next one. What are brands that you recommend for beginners? I have a whole video dedicated to watercolor supplies for beginners, but if we're just talking watercolor for beginners, I always say the Winsor Newton Cotman sets. Mainly because I bought my palette that's Winsor Newton Cotman like 3+ years ago, and it's still my most used palette. I've added some colors that I feel like I've needed and I've expanded upon it, but it's still my main palette. And it's one of the only student grade watercolor paint brands that has such a wide range of colors. I don't think any other student grade brand has as many colors as the Cotman sets. So even if you only buy like a 12 set, you can expand on that because, different art stores have the tubes separately that you can then refill the pans with. It's just a really great brand to be able to expand with and grow with if you want. Like I said, there's a whole video dedicated to watercolor supplies for beginners, so I'll link that below and probably annotate it or card it here, that if you want to hear all about that, you can go to that video and hear me ramble on about watercolor supplies for way too long. If you had the chance to be the creator of a piece of artwork, which piece would it be? Now, when I first read this question, my automatic thought was the Great Wave. I know most people might say like Mona Lisa or some other kind of, very universally well-known piece of artwork, which the Great Wave is. It's just, probably not as known as the Mona Lisa or anything. And it's just that, the Mona Lisa really isn't my style, and I know the Great Wave isn't really either, but I've always been really fascinated with woodblock print styles, and I just like that one, and that was the first one that came to mind, so that's gonna be the answer that I'm sticking to. How old were you when you started painting? Well, I guess I've always kind of really drawn, you draw in school and stuff, but actually really kind of concentrating, especially on watercolor painting, I was probably like 15, 16, so not that long ago. I mean, I'm only 20 now, so like 5 years ago, like 3 to 5 years ago, I kind of seriously started getting into watercolor painting. Which painting expresses you the most? Well, I could be really literal and say the profile picture that I painted myself to use a couple years ago, but I guess Rebirth, which is what I made kind of when I launched my site, and I wanted to make something that kind of looked like the site. I don't know if that makes sense, but looked like it kind of belonged on my site. Like I used the colors that are in my logo and, my YouTube intro and stuff in that. And it was just kind of, I'm finally, after so many years of doing this, expanding into something more real, I guess. I launched my store, I started doing commissions, all of this other stuff, and it's not technically supposed to be me, but I think everyone thinks it is because it's got like a similar hairstyle, and I don't know, if you look at it, it does not look like me at all. But it has a lot of colors that I really love and techniques. It's got, galaxy in the front, and I don't know, it's just kind of special because that's what I made for my website when I started it, and yeah, so I guess that one for right now. How do you practice anatomy? I don't. I know, that's really awful. I don't know, it's just, again, once you've drawn so many things, like once you just have kept drawing and, looking at references and kind of, you've drawn the certain things so many times, you just kind of learn, you know, what looks right and what looks wrong. Like, I haven't, you know, drawn that many hands, but somehow I can kind of, you know, like figure out what, you know, the hand structure looks like and how the fingers move. So I guess just drawing, you will eventually kind of learn what looks wrong or right. Of course, you know, there's fantastic YouTube videos that are great for different anatomies, like Mark Crilly's realistic manga video helped me a lot because it teaches you the anatomy in the face. Like, for instance, you know, the eyes are generally separated by the width of one eye and different things like that, so you kind of can learn what, you know, the anatomy should be and, you know, expand upon that and like tweak it to look like if you're drawing a particular person or whatever. But kind of learning basics like that, like a body is 7 heads, 8 heads, whatever it is, and things like that, you can kind of, if you have a base measurement that you know, you can kind of just teach yourself what looks right and what looks wrong and keep on going from there. So yeah, YouTube is a fantastic resource. You know, you're all on it now. It's free. There's great things, you know, just look up anatomy videos. You know, there's great books too that, you know, have all the bone structure if you really want to get into it, and the muscles and all of that kind of stuff. But YouTube is fantastic for things like that if you really want to get into anatomy and learn basics like that. Besides watercolors, what other mediums do you use? Well, I kind of do everything. I haven't really done oil painting. I have oil painting, but it's just not, it just seems so complicated and it's not really my thing. Like, I don't really use acrylic paint either in paintings. Like, I'll use it, you know, for, you know, white for stars and stuff like that, but not really straight up painting. But I kind of do a bit of everything. Obviously, you see mainly watercolor on my channel, though I've done a few digital paintings, but it's just not something that I feel like doing. I like to get my hands messy, and so generally that just kind of works with watercolor. I really like the way watercolor looks, so I just kind of gravitate toward that. Though colored pencil is also something that I use a lot, and I really like to use colored pencil on top of watercolor, so I just kind of mix everything together. I don't really use markers that much either, though I have some. I have used them. I still use them occasionally. It's just normally not for artwork purposes necessarily. It's more like, you know, I use them for coloring the wolf fur for my Warrior Wolf Link cosplay, things like that. So I kind of do a bit of everything. Also, paper cutting is a huge thing. It kind of stemmed from, I did papercraft models a ton when I was younger. Like, when I was 14 or 15, I built the life-size Link papercraft, and so it's just kind of something that I've kept up with. So I still make papercraft models, but it's also just kind of transformed into doing more paper cutting and more paper light box work, and it's just something that I really like and I do a lot of. And I've done a couple of ones where I've made kind of diorama type things that it's kind of like a light box, but I've actually colored and drawn things. Yeah, so I do a bit of everything. When did you get serious on video art suggestions? Can you do the cheap art supplies challenge? Yeah, definitely. I've always been interested in doing a cheap art supplies challenge, but then it kind of becomes, well, what do you consider cheap? You know, does it have to be like dollar store, or is Crayola cheap? You know, watercolors, like if I did a cheap watercolor art supplies challenge, it kind of becomes more difficult, because do you consider like the $10 to $14 like chalky pan sets that like Michaels or someplace has cheap, or does it have to be like the prang or prong or whatever it is, like $1 5 color things, you know? So it's definitely something that I've always looked into. It's just kind of, well, what are the parameters, because I don't really use markers, so I can't really do, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's definitely something I've looked at. And as for video suggestions, I'm always interested in hearing what everyone's interested in. Like, if I know that's like, there's not very many tags or anything for art channels or anything like that, but, you know, I'm interested in hearing what you want to see. And I'm not getting any complaints for doing all of the speed painting videos, which is generally what's on my channel, but I've done tutorials in the past and I really want to do tutorials in the future. It's just there's so many tutorial videos can just become so broad. You know, the galaxy tutorial is something fairly simple. It's a very specific thing. But when you get into, oh, how do you draw a person? Well, there's like 500 ways to draw a person. Do you want to draw a realistic person, or do you want to draw a cartoon person? So yeah, I'm always interested in hearing what you all want to see on this channel. So never feel bad for suggesting a video in the comments of something. Like, I might not get to them all, but I'm always interested in hearing what you guys want to see. Have you been to any art schools / colleges in the past that made you this good? If so, what were they? Nope, I'm completely self-taught. I haven't had, like, the last kind of art class that I had was 8th grade, you know, you have a bit of every subject and art was one of them. So it wasn't really like, oh, this is how you draw stuff. It's like, just here's an idea and try and run with it, that kind of thing. So I really don't have any kind of formal art teaching. I mean, YouTube videos if you want to go with that, but yeah, no formal art teaching at all. What watercolor brands do you use / love the most? Well, I already rambled on before about Winsor & Newton, but the cotton palette is my main palette, but I've also bought Winsor & Newton Pro colors that I really like, that I've kind of added in. You know, there's a few colors that I wanted more pigmentation to, so I've gone after the Pro colors of those, or some in-between colors. I've also really gotten into Daniel Smith colors, which are, you know, there's so many of them, and it's amazing, but it's like awful for my bank account. Like, the iridescent colors are beautiful, and I'm kind of gradually building up those. But I've also bought like a bunch of, not strange brands, but other brands that I've just kind of tested out. Like, I have the Kuretake palette, and I have a White Nights palette that I used actually in this video. I really wanted to test it out. So my favorite ones are definitely Winsor & Newton and Daniel Smith. Maybe Daniel Smith a little more just because of the color selection is incredible, but I really love both of those the most. How do you make skin tone with watercolor? I wing it. That's an awful answer, but really, I mean, it normally is some kind of mixture of like a Naples yellow, like some kind of yellowish color mixed in with some kind of red or pinkish color. I mean, it depends on what skin tone the person has, and most of the time I just kind of layer colors up in between, and it just kind of creates a skin tone color. And I mean, half of the time the people have blue faces, so I'm like the worst person to possibly ask about this. But if you're interested in something like that, I can definitely talk through mixing skin tones if you'd like a video on that. But yeah, wing it. Where do you take inspiration from? I kind of take it from everywhere. I mean, I'm on the internet a lot looking up, you know, looking on Instagram or Twitter and stuff, and I just kind of see things that kind of appeal to me, so I keep them in mind, like whether it's a color palette or things like that. I wrote a whole post a couple of months ago about staying inspired in artwork, and it kind of has something like this about how you can motivate yourself or how you can be happy with your artwork, and I'll leave it in the description box for anyone that wants to read that. But all of my paintings are kind of like 5 different ideas that I've had in my head that I kind of smushed together. Like, I never start a painting without knowing kind of exactly how I want it to look like before I even start it. Like, I will know what the finished product looks like before I start. So I have started doing thumbnail sketches in a sketchbook, but really it's just kind of, I see a technique that I really want to try, or a color palette that I really like, and I have this other idea of like a pose I really want to do, or this other kind of theme, and I just kind of mash them all together. Like, for instance, I have a Women of Star Wars series planned, which hopefully is going to start in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully you guys are excited about that, but I really wanted to do some Star Wars characters, but I also really wanted to try some double exposure paintings, and you know, I haven't painted galaxies in a while, so I want to do that. And it's just, every painting that I do is kind of like 5 ideas meshed together from just various things that I see, whether it be pop culture like movies or other people's artwork. You know, never fully copy someone else's artwork, but it's a good place to get inspiration from. Like, you know, you really like how this color palette looks, or this technique, like whether it's like using salt to, you know, separate the paint in watercolors like I did with my last one. just things like that. Like for this one, I saw this kind of like tree style, and you know, the window above my desk, I can see all the leaves changing. So it's just kind of like every painting that I do, it's like 5 different inspiration fields like meshing together to create this one thing. So there's lots of places, but the internet is great for inspiration. Just don't fully rip off someone's work. You know, take inspiration from it, don't copy it. That kind of thing. Well, that was the last question. Thanks so much to all of you for submitting your questions. Again, if you'd like to see Q&A videos like this, I don't know, maybe a couple times a year or something, leave your questions in the comments and I'll answer them in the next one. Like all of my paintings that I do, there's prints and other things available on my Redbubble store of the painting that I've been working on during this video, as well as if you're interested in commissions or originals or anything like that, you can go to my website, which will also be linked in the description box. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next painting video.